So welcome everybody. This is our second session for today. So if you are here for the first time, there is also going to be a recording of this morning's session that you might want to look up because the questions and the answers and the discussion will obviously be unique to each
Wow.
interaction. So we also look forward to having a lovely recording of this session, and we'll try and put the two up as soon as possible for anybody who missed it or who wants to go over and hear it again. So I'm going to start by introducing Mia Schmallenbach, who is going to explain to you who she is and where she's from. She's going to tell you a little bit about Quest and then about the wonderful movie that she made or helped to make and how all of that happened. Then we'll watch the movie and then we will have some discussion with some special guests who I'll introduce a little bit later. While you're watching both the Quest introduction and the movie itself, please feel free to drop questions in the chat as you think of them, because there's just so much amazing information and experience that goes on during the course of this movie that you might not remember what you were wanting to know by the end. And over to you, Mia.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. So I am Mia from Quest, Quality Education in Europe for Sustainable Social Transformation. We'll first start by showing you a very short intro video of Quest, and then I will just say a few words about the movie.
Welcome to Quest, Quality Education for Sustainable Social Transformation. We are a European network that connects pioneer organizations from all over Europe in order to promote research, practices and policies that support innovative and transformative education in a fast-changing world. Let's talk with the people that made all this possible.
The NGO was founded in 2017, and we started sponsoring different activities such as a democratic school in Brussels with the aim of offering respectful education environment that recognizes children's rights and their own inner drive to learn within a community.
During this year, Practices Democratic Education, we realized the need of alternative schools in terms of legitimacy and connection. And that's why our next step was really to respond to these needs and providing a scientific basis to alternative approach, mostly in terms of research, but also to provide connection to innovative pioneer educational organization while at the same time providing visibility for them. And that's how our network is born.
Quest Network now offers support, legitimacy, opportunities for exchanging ideas, doing projects together, and pursuing common collective goals.
Today, our work covers a large range of topics and activities, from researches and conferences on different learning approaches to innovative teacher trainings, as well as policy and advocacy activities at the European and national levels. We are establishing rich connections with members all across Europe, with whom we are conducting Erasmus Plus projects that are putting into practice transformative pedagogical questions.
You can find more about our projects, our advocacy activities, and about how to become a member on our website and on our social media. Together, we can make educational change happen.
All right. So maybe just a few words about how we came about to make this movie. So first of all, myself and my colleague Martina, we heard about the Suvemäe project, and we just had to go there and see. And we had no plan of actually filming or making any kind of video documentary whatsoever. So we traveled there, and as soon as we arrived, we just realized like this was way too cool. So we had to do something. So we improvised. We quickly set up a kind of a station in one of the rooms of the school with our hand phones, and we told anybody who wanted to come in, who wanted to speak about their experience in the school, to come forward. And so that's what we did. We are not movie makers, and all this kind of came about in a kind of an organic, improvised way. We did notice that, you know, doing this project actually was a huge boost for Suvemäe and for other projects who wanted also to go into the same direction. And so right now we're working really hard to now get professionalized in the video field, and we are expanding our team for that. And I'd like to encourage anybody here who has an organization who's making a huge, you know, like an impact on education, and to apply for membership at Quest. It's completely free. And this movie here is just one of the examples of the ways that we find to support what you are doing. And so please don't hesitate. And we are now finding ways to really help and support our international members beyond Europe in many different ways. So, and enjoy the movie.
Wow, it's just so inspirational, isn't it? I've seen that. I think that was my third time now, and every time I watch it, I just get so grateful that this project happened. So I'd like to introduce now a couple of very special people who've joined us in order to be able to answer some questions and give us even more insight, as if we needed any more than we've already got. So I'm just going to mention we've got Derry, who you saw in the documentary, who in many ways, you know, is at the root of all of this, because I think if it hadn't been for Derry's own experiments, which he documented in the book, Another Way is Possible, it's possible that Charlie might not have been inspired. So you have this domino effect that now also Mia is supporting by creating this movie, that this domino effect can keep moving through the world, and hopefully some of the people who are here today will be inspired by Charlie. So Derry has been a deputy head principal, as well as a school inspector in the UK. He's dropped quite a few really interesting links in the chat. He's also the author of the Hannam Report, which is really worth reading if you want to. We'll be able to direct questions to Derry. I'm just checking that my microphone is still working. Something seemed to glitch out there for a second. All right, and then we also have with us Shifan in Sri Lanka, who is the co-founder of Kinder Republic, or Kinder Republic, whichever way you'd like to say it, which is a completely democratic school. So that it's not a school within a school. It's like what Charlie is doing, but sort of taken to another level of autonomy. And then we have Wei, and Wei is actually a graduate of a holistic democratic school. So he's got the inside view of what it feels like to grow up with autonomy over his own learning. He's also a musician, and he has also now returned to his alma mater to be a teacher. So all three of these people have really got some quite complete perspectives on this topic. So before we go into questions, I'd like to just invite each of you to briefly say hello and share a few opening remarks of something that you think is most relevant to the people who have joined today or are listening to this recording. Maybe we can go in the order that I mentioned you. So Derry, since you're right next to me on my screen, over to you.
Wow, I feel I've already said too much on the film. But my own background has been inspired, I suppose, by A.S. Neil's Summerhill. When I was a young teacher, I tried to create a democratic classroom with children having the opportunity to study things that were of interest to them and to manage the community of the class in a democratic way with elections and voting, participation in decision making. I thought I'd get fired, but I didn't. The next year I got put in charge of 200 kids, the whole year group in this big secondary school. We carried on doing this, and that sort of really set me up. And I couldn't understand why everybody didn't do it. I still can't quite understand, but the big job we need to do is to take these skills and attitudes which we know work in the private democratic schools, to move those inspirations and ideas and success stories into our state systems. And that's why what Charlie is doing I find very, very exciting, because here he is managing a democratic school, or an almost nearly democratic school, a few compromises that we might talk about, but within a state school in Tallinn, and there it is actually happening. The only other models I know of schools within schools like this are in the United States, with the work of Lawrence Kohlberg and his Just Community Schools, one of which is still alive in Scarsdale in Boston. Might be another one worth having a look at. But anyway, I think what Charlie is doing in Tallinn is, as my Danish academic friend says, one of the most exciting and important things that's happening in Europe right now.
Beautiful. Thank you, Derry. For participants, if you want to drop a question into the chat, or you can even just say, I have a question, and then we'll ask you to unmute shortly. Shifan, would you like to share your thoughts next?
Right. Thank you, Anna. I would like to maybe just say a few things on why this event is happening today of all days, because it's the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. And so obviously, as societies, we have a lot of expectations of education. There is a lot of money being spent on education. I mean, arguably not enough money, but still there is quite a lot of money. And then we also see that even if you take the schooling children, spend many years of their lives in this, so that's also an investment they are making. And for this investment, we of course have certain expectations on what we are getting out of it. And then there have been always questions about, is this investment working? Are we getting the expected outcomes that we need? And so like the documentary shows, Suvemäe is a different way of trying to achieve those objectives. But what is it exactly that makes democratic education different is, I think, where it connects to the UDHR, because, okay, this is sharing a small picture from the wall of our school. This is from the first article of the Universal Declaration, that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. So it does not say that you are equal in dignity and rights after you are 18 or after you've completed your education or anything like that. Everybody has. But there tends to be a lot of discrimination against young people, and especially people in education, where they're not seen as deserving of the same rights as other people, which then I think leads to a lot of discrimination and suppression of rights. And that's one of the reasons I think why democratic education works so well, because it respects people as being rights holders and does not take away those rights. So there is one argument for democratic education in that it works better, but also an argument for democratic education in that it is more affirming of the rights that all of us have. And just to give a quick example, in Sri Lanka, and I guess in many countries, students in school and in universities tend to be very active in social causes and in protests and things. But in Sri Lanka, there's this tendency to then say, like, why are these people protesting? They should be in university and studying, as if their right to expression is somehow not there if they're studying. Like, well, how is that the case? And whether you're studying or not, you should have the freedom of expression. So there's this sort of strange suppression of rights of people in education. And I think that's one of the problems in the conventional system. So I hope we can talk more about this when we get into the questions.
Wonderful, thank you, Fran. And it's a very relevant point, because I often say, when I'm trying to explain this form of education to people, that this is, as far as I know, the only approach to education that did not begin with trying to have a new approach to education. It actually began with having a different approach to relating between adult and child in a way that's fully rights respecting, and the educational value comes as a very happy, wonderful, amazing side effect from that. Wei, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. I'm truly humbled to be here with all of you, especially Derry and Sifan. I would like to share some history about our country. Like we've been in the martial law for 50 years or so, and then the martial law was lifted, and there is this huge dynamic and force within the public to have the progressive reforms in every aspect of a society, of a country, and education is one of them. And so our school, Holistic School, is founded in 1995, sorry. And we didn't know what we are doing back then. But we were very idealistic. We imagined that if we give the right or the choice back to the students, they will become they'll automatically become self-directed in learning in every aspect. But it's not really the case, unfortunately. And we've been struggling for decades, maybe like 10 or 15 years, just to try to figure out like what went wrong during this process. And I think we are arriving at a point that we know that how the Asian culture, and especially from the Chinese so-called culture, pan-Chinese culture, the influence of the culture to children, and to kind of alter the way they feel about themselves and their way of learning. And I think democratic education is the key to reverse that education, in fact, give back themselves, to transform to back to themselves, and to become a true individual of a democratic society. And that's what I'll buy my dream to be a musician. I always support this cause because I think this is so important, especially for us. Taiwan is a newly minted democratic country. We need this for our democracy and for our society to work. Yeah, so I'm here and truly honored, and feel free to ask me everything. Yeah.
I really love that you've highlighted that way, that, you know, education is enculturation. And if we want a democratic society, young people need to grow up knowing what that looks like, not on paper, but in reality in terms of their relationships. So I think this is also where I know in many parts of the world now, as things are getting more complicated, many governments are becoming more authoritarian in an attempt to try and maintain it's kind of very ironic. And I think this really is a time in history where it's very necessary that as many young people as possible grow up actually empowered and taking responsibility, I think is hugely important. So if you are watching this on Facebook, you can also contribute your questions. We do have Dalipa very kindly watching out for your questions, and they can be passed along to us here. I'd like to start by throwing a question to all three of our panelists, which is something that's been mentioned quite a lot in the movie. And Derry, you also mentioned it again now, is that there can be quite a lot of opposition from fellow teachers in a school where one teacher is experimenting or exploring this, or even where the principal has actually decided that this experiment is going to take place. What do you feel, or your experience or your guess, what are those teachers worried about or afraid of that we could support them in coming to understand or being able to get over their fears? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Anybody who'd like to, any of the three of you who'd like to jump in?
Well, in my experience, it's about, especially for those teachers who worked in an authoritarian system, it's about loss of status and loss of control. Of course, for those of us who kind of move through the mirror or through the looking glass, as it were, what you find is when you get the other side, you actually have more authentic status through better, honest human relationships. And you give up caring about control, frankly, because when the relationships are right, the control looks after itself.
That's beautiful, beautifully said. And yeah, so much my experience. It's just such a beautiful place to go every day to work in a democratic school. It's intensely, immensely fulfilling. Does anybody else have thoughts on this before we move on to the next topic?
Yeah,
Shafan?
I can just build on that a little bit. I think so if we consider the educators of today, whether they're teachers or administrators, and then go back to their childhood and the kind of educational experiences they had at schools, at homes, wherever, it's quite unlikely that they experience a right respecting type of education. So they were probably in what we would describe as a coercive system of education, and probably even in an era where there was less emphasis on child rights. So there may have been even more cases of corporal punishment, child labor, and things like that. So obviously, this is going to have some impact on people. So it's a form of trauma, I would say. It's just that because it's happening to everybody around us, nobody recognizes this and nobody thinks that this is something that needs to be addressed. And so you've just carried this into your adulthood and you are struggling to cope with this. And then sometimes if you see a child having enjoying the right to freedom, it sort of brings up this trauma because you're like, when I was a child, I wasn't allowed to do this, and I was punished for being this person, and you just don't have a way of coping with that other than to maybe stop this happening, so that at least it stops reminding you of that trauma. So unless we have some ways of providing healing for these people, they are carrying this trauma with them, and they deserve to find healing as much as anybody else. So I think we need to see that sometimes the people who are driving systems of oppression are themselves victims of the past, and then how do we help them come past that?
That is very, very moving and very beautiful, and I think very true. And I think it just underlines why this can't be a battle. It has to be an invitation. And yeah, the potential that I think that this form of education holds to bring social healing at a time that we need it on the planet as a whole. Anything else to add before we move on?
Well, there's a bigger picture, of course. If we're wanting to move the kind of methods of Suvemäe into the public school system, we are going to have to change a lot of teachers, which is why I argue for my 20% proposal. But my guess is, from my own experience of working in schools, if you go into a typical school, not one where the staff have been selected to work in a more participative way, which was the very privileged position I found myself in working in state schools. But if you were going to try and bring about change in a school where most of the teachers had only experienced authoritarian methods of instruction, both in their own experience as students and in their experience as teachers, bringing about change is much more difficult, which is why I suggest we need to start at a fairly small scale. And I think 20% is enough to have an impact, but not enough to scare the pants off every teacher. They're going to have to suddenly work in a democratic way. There will always be some who want to give it a try, and those are the ones who need to be given opportunities and support.
Mm, mm. I just want to highlight something though there before we come to Wei. And Angela, I see you, and we will definitely come to you after Wei. In that dairy, one of the things that strikes me about your own experience that you document in another way as possible is that it wasn't so much the content that they could study that you handed over to the students first. It was control of the rules in the classroom and the discipline. And I've sometimes wondered if that's also maybe something that where teachers don't have permission or the ability to hand over any of the content learning, if simply transforming that relationship in terms of introducing democratic elements to the relationships, I think can already start making an enormous difference. Your thought?
I did both at the same time, actually. We introduced a democratic approach to managing the class and the classroom, but also opened up the possibility for students to follow studies that were of interest to them. And I was fortunate enough to have a control of quite a big chunk of the curriculum in the first year of a secondary school. I was the English, social studies, religious education, history and geography teacher, which gave me about 50% of the time the kids were in school, of which I could steal, as it were, half roughly as a start to say, there you are, kids, you can come up with your own projects. We'll push the given curriculum to one side. And I've yet to find a teacher who can convince me that they can't push 20% of their mandated curriculum to one side in order to make a space for the kids to make their own.
Beautiful. Where?
Yeah, I would just like to share the first thing is that it's how amazing to be with you guys and always learn that there are so many things happen in different part of the world and trying to formative a new way of education, new methods, alternative. And but regarding the teachers' resistance, like we holistic school, we're kind of like Kinder Republic. We're independent of autonomy school. So like teacher who came here, they are already in support of the idea. But still, they find it difficult to adapt it into practice and into their teaching or even just the day-to-day life living with the students because we are a boarding school. So I think for us in Taiwan, the hardest part for every adult or even students and parents is that the inner the inner transformation of how you see the relationship between you and yourself, and then to the others, to the kids and to the minors or to the other persons, to the other people. Yeah, and I think that is the really hard part. Just like the documentary already showed that the students, they talk about like how they get more comfortable socially and being able to express themselves, but not without after some time of feeling secure about the place. That is the same here in Taiwan in holistic school, that every students, teachers, and parents, they need to have time to really experience this autonomy that they never had before, and they have to feel secure about speaking for themselves and from themselves, and then they started to transform into a different person afterwards. So I think the resistance is not really about it's not really about like people arguing with each other. It's about like how we grow ourselves. In our case, how to gain self growth during the process of democratizing even ourselves. Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge we have. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, beautifully put. I run courses for people who are facilitating this form of education, and I always like to say that, you know, self-directed education facilitation is actually a path of personal growth. And, you know, what Shifan was also saying about the healing from the trauma and the time that students and facilitators or teachers need to adapt, I think it's very important that we don't try to rush things. Because I think that sometimes if people dip their toes in the water, try it out, try the 20%, try the school within a school, and expect it to give results too quickly, I think it's really important to realize that we do need to give people time to make the transition. Angela, are you still with us? I saw that you have a question. You're welcome to
Yeah,
unmute.
I
Yes.
was, but I'm sorry that's because I'm walking now, so it's a little bit inconvenience to I was want to making some response, but maybe later. I'm sorry because I was
Okay,
walk on the
bad
street.
timing. No worries. We'll come back to you in a few minutes. So we had a question in the chat earlier, which I'm curious to see if anybody would answer the same as I would, which was about making furniture, furnishings for a democratic school, and how somebody who is in that industry could support democratic schools. I'm curious to see what the panelists have to say. Yes, Shifan.
Well, I think we should ask the students what kind of furniture they want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it may be very directly possible because they're asking something very straightforward. And sometimes they may be expressing a need that we don't necessarily have a clear answer for, but then we can sort of marry the interest and need of the people who are going to use the furniture with the skill set of the designers and carpenters who are building the furniture, and try to come up with, okay, we could try building something like this. Would you think it would work? Let's build a prototype and see, and sort of iterate. And then, of course, if you create something, it can be offered to other people that, you know, such and such a school helped design this. They're using it for this purpose. If that resonates with you, you can use it. But if you have some other need, then talk to us, because I think that process of dialogue and so on one side, respecting what the child is going to use this needs from it, but at the same time also respecting what the craftsman who is able to produce this is able to offer, and their skill set and their experience. And you bring these two together, and if it's done in the genuine spirit of dialogue, I would imagine it's always possible to come up with something that both parties are happy with.
Yeah, I love that. So even in something as concrete as creating furniture, again, we see that what really transforms the situation is how we handle the relationships. Derry.
There's a school in Finland, I've been busy trying to find the name of it, where starting with one teacher, but moving to more, as Stefan said, the kids have been absolutely involved in looking at the kind of furniture they need, because there's nothing worse than the sit up and beg plastic and metal standard school chair or wooden standard school chair. And the kids have worked with furniture designers, and I think they're called ergonomicists, people who study the way in which the human body responds to workplaces. And the kids have come up with some amazing ideas, and it's meant that they've had to learn a lot about materials and about design. And now some of the ideas that they've come up with are spreading to other schools. So it might even become a commercially valuable proposition to involve kids in the design of their own school furniture. It could lead to quite a production run if this caught on in other schools. Wonderful idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, the kids, by involving the kids, it not only transforms the relationships, it also gives the kids learning experiences and maybe a source of funding. Where?
Yeah, I totally agree with Stefan and Derry. Like we won't be able to tell you what kind or exactly what type or what style of furniture we will be needing, but we can tell you what will happen is that we will probably invite you to our school and just chit chat with the kids and see our environment, and maybe we can discuss the design and the needs and come up with something like totally new or just never been done before. Or and for the kids, that will be a very valuable learning experience. By it's sort of like a research project, and I think for different school there will be just different kind of furniture they needed. And yeah, I think, yeah, just like Charlie said, like one size doesn't fit all. So I don't know. Yeah.
Great. Mia, is this an answer to the current question or a new one? Yes. Okay.
Yes, I just want to say my formal background is industrial design, and I spent quite some years in furniture design. And I would be fascinated if I could document and follow a process like this, because I feel there's a really big potential when it comes to designing spaces, designing furniture, objects with which we interact with. And when we take an active role of being able to be behind also the designing of this, the design methodology, it's really an incredible potential for all kinds of skill developments and new dynamics that can happen within a space where we use these objects. So I would be fascinated to document any kind of research project, or even to contribute in writing a research project to apply for funding to get some kind of thing like that going. So for the person who wrote this question in the chat, I'd be super interested to know in what country you are, and please take contact with us. I will put my email in the chat, because if you want to take this discussion further, we can get very creative to find ideas to create opportunities like this to happen with schools. So yes.
And that for me highlights another aspect that I thought of here, in that for example, at Riverstone Village, if we didn't even need any furniture, we wouldn't be using your services, we wouldn't be going through this process. But I can guarantee you there's probably going to be a couple of kids who are very, very interested to come and hang out with you, where you are working on things you are already working on. So sometimes it's not about the products that you can offer, but it's actually about the skills that you can volunteer, so that you become an extended member of the learning community. For example, when Charlie was mentioning specialists and the need for specialists, I immediately thought, yes, but that's where we always reach out to our parents and their extended families and their neighbors and the people around the corner. And that's also where democratic schools, and even a democratic school within a school, can really become integrated, rather than being this little warehouse where the children are locked away from reality. Shifan.
Yeah, just remembered something that I thought I would add, is that while it may not be part of the intended function of furniture per se, what I've noticed is children do personalize their furniture a lot. So whether that's in terms of writing their name or drawing, doodling something. So and in that school setting, it's often frowned upon because it's supposedly, or damaging the furniture that somebody else would need to use. But we see elsewhere in society that like when you buy a phone, you can personalize the color of it, and then there's just so many ways that people are actually monetizing the personalization of things. So that could also be one way that it goes to. But at the same time, sometimes the thrill of doing the personalization that children tend to do is because it's not permitted and because it's not expected. And if you, brought in places where they could write their name or put inserts to personalize it, then maybe they wouldn't want to do it anymore, because you don't have the thrill of breaking the rules anymore.
Fabulous. I see that in addition to somebody joining us from 1 a.m. in Colorado, we also have just been joined by a young person in Africa who is a 15-year-old who is also working to create more openness and reality in education. I don't know if we'll have time to introduce him. Let me know if you're up to it, Fadine. Okay, so we are nearing the end of our session. I think, how many more minutes do we have left? Henning or Siobhan? Timekeeper? We have like 3 minutes. So I want to ask one more quick question, because often people struggle to imagine, as the principal said in the movie, she thought that it would be the lazy kids who would join and that nothing really would happen. Very briefly, what has been personal experience of the panelists on how some of the kids have spent their time in ways that you wouldn't expect, given the stereotype that the kids will just sort of waste their time or go to sleep or, you know, play on their phones or something like that? What are some of the things you've seen them do that are interesting and that might not have been predicted? Like the guy building his box, sound box. Anybody?
It takes some
Yes, I
kids.
have one.
Sorry.
But there you go first. There you go
Oh,
first.
no, why?
Please.
Go on.
Way, your turn to go first.
Okay. So like one of the graduates from holistic school, he always have this passion about things with wheels. So after he get into the school, she just managed to find a way to buy a car, a second-handed car, or maybe like a, and then he tear it apart, then assemble it together again. So I don't know, like he did it when he's underage, and he has so much passion for cars that like we trying to find what's it called, like the technician who fix cars to taught him how to fix cars, and now he's working in the tire industry and testing motorcycles. So that's what happened when you give freedom back to the students, that they can actually pursue their passion or dreams for what he loved. Or another example is that one of the other students who just graduated, he likes the I don't know how to say. He likes to edit videos so much that he started making money by editing videos for like just freelancers, and before he graduated, and his graduation project is showing series of videos that he edited for the others, and it was just amazing. That would blow your mind, that you thought it was like from some adult and professional, but he actually learned from scratch from the very beginning and into this amazing display of maturity in certain profession. And that's been happening like since the past 20 years. It happens all the time with our students, that when you allow them to and even support them to pursue their dreams, and that's just it. Yeah.
Beautiful. Derry?
I was just going to say that I think we have to accept that some students who've been in regular education settings before they discover Ways School or Suvemäe, they've had their capacity to dream knocked out of them. And although I think it's there in all young people, there will be some who take a little while to believe that it's really true and to discover what those dreams that they once had, to rediscover them and get moving. So we do need to be patient with kids. But I see a little tension here between the principal of Charlie's school and Suvemäe, which is the principal a little bit sees Suvemäe as a kind of therapy unit to help kids recover their willingness to learn in a conventional way. And then when they've had their therapy, they'll go back and do quite well in the main school. Whereas I guess Charlie sees a rather opposite process of influence, and so do I. Whereas in fact, kids in Charlie's Suvemäe will discover their passion and really get rolling. And in fact, they won't have much desire to go back to the main school. And in the end, Suvemäe hopefully will influence the way things are done in the main school. I don't want to cause problems for Charlie by raising that point, but I think the tension is there.
I think it's a very important point, because if I look at our own facility, Riverstone Village, what we see is that the kids who stay long enough, the kids who stay really long, end up seriously overachieving at the end. I mean, we're just busy with assessments now because our year ends in December, and we get external people in a particular profession to look at work samples. And we keep getting told things like, oh, this kid is going to be really bored in the first year of tertiary in their subject. So I do think that it's a mind shift that will only really happen as more and more kids are actually allowed to do this long term, that we'll really start seeing those contrasts. Our time is up. I'm going to invite each of our panelists to say a quick goodbye, and Mia as well. If 4 of you would like to say a quick goodbye, and then we are back online in how many hours time? At 5 p.m. UTC, we'll be back. So if you would like some more, please do join us then. Over to whichever of you would like to check out first. Derry, you're on screen, so maybe you want to check out first, and then Mia, and then Stefan, and then Wei.
Okay, well, thanks for having me. And I'm sure kids do need space and time to realise their dreams, and we need to be patient while they discover what they are, because it may well be our responsibility as educators that they lost sight of them.
I want to thank everybody for organizing this, and it's just such a wonderful power moment to be able to all connect. And so looking forward to the next session later today.
Okay, so I really enjoyed being part of this and grateful for the opportunity. And as a sort of closing message, just sort of remind of something that I find helpful when trying to decide how to respond in certain ways when it comes to respecting children, which is to think, if I were to say or do this to an adult, would that adult see this as respectful? And if they wouldn't, then almost certainly it's not a respectful thing to do to children. And we so often find ourselves falling back on doing those kind of things because that's sort of what's in our programming, and healing from that and unlearning that is such a challenge. But this is a very easy test that I've found. And for anybody interested in getting more of a right respecting approach to education, or just dealing with children in general, this is a message I would like to leave you with.
Thank you. Wei?
Yeah, I'm just truly humbled to be on the panelist. Yeah, because just I'm truly humbled, and to be invited by Stefan and to meet Daria again and Mia again. I'm really happy, and to see you all. I just want to add that I think we have another event in January 23rd. Is that right, Jenna?
Yes.
Yes.
I think it was
Yes.
24th.
Oh,
But we'll
24th.
But there is-
Okay.
make sure we've got
Yeah.
your email address, and then we'll make sure that you have all the details. But do you
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
mention it?
please,
Yeah?
please, people,
Yes.
just send them private message if you would like your emails, and then we'll stay in touch. And also Taiwan will be hosting IDEC 2024 next year during July, I think July, end of the July. So if you are really interested in democratic education or any other alternative methods of education, that's the place you should go and to check it out, because everyone will be there and they are more than happy to share their experiences and to discuss with you what could be done and what could be happen. Yeah.
Wonderful. That brings us to a close for now. And I would like to just thank all of the participants, because you are really the most important people on this call. You and the people that you're going to reach out to, the people who are watching this recording, you are actually the most important people in this relationship right here, because you are the ones who are now going to decide how you are going to take this forward. And I just want to let you know that there actually is a very large international community that is very ready to support and receive and welcome you. So we look forward to enjoying that journey together. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye for now. Until next time. Wonderful. I said this morning that every time I see that, I see new things, and I just had the same experience again. So yeah, another great reason to watch the recording if you can, and share it with other people so you can discuss it with them. And now we have the privilege of being able to discuss this movie with some special people who have managed to be here. Charlie himself, who at this point doesn't really need an introduction. I think we've already got to know him pretty well. Derry, who we also saw in the movie. He's also dropped in the chat a few links to his book about his own experience actually running a democratic classroom many years ago in the English public school system in the UK. And also the Hannam report is worth having a good look at. And then Sivan in Sri Lanka, who is the founder of Kinder Republic, or Kinder Republic, as I like to think of it. Also a 100% self-directed and democratic space. So they are going to be answering some questions now. If you'd like to drop them in the chat. If you are watching on Facebook, we also do have somebody keeping an eye out for questions that you can add to the chat around the stream there that will come through to us here. And I'd like to invite our three panelists to just give a few opening remarks of anything that they'd like to contribute at this point, maybe starting with Charlie.
Okay, thank you. It humbles me, all this attention. I've never been good at that. But I appreciate very much this possibility. It's been a long process, and I think that it's not definitely not my merit alone. There has been a lot of work, but I have met wonderful people. Some of whom are here: Derry, Andreas, Mike, people from EUDEC. Lots of inspiration since I started researching about democratic education, and yeah, it's a process that continues. This is non-stop, and I'm very happy to answer or to provide some insights or questions, comments that you might have. I understand that, sorry, that sometimes it gets a bit, it's a bit, what to say, many people are skeptical about the topic about talking about democracy in a state school. It is a process that I believe needs to be shaped by the community. And that has been since day one the goal. Parents, unfortunately, they are not so active. Some of them are, but the kids, it's important that we are all participating, listening to each other. And I feel that what you saw there is an overview of this collective process that continues. So I don't know, Derry, would you like to take over, please?
Derry, you need to unmute.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh dear. Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
What a privilege it's been to be involved in this project. I mean, I worked all my life in state schools in just about every role, and then became an inspector for a bit. I had second thoughts about that, but it did give me the opportunity to help Summerhill survive when the inspection system tried to shut it down. They lost the court case, I'm very pleased to say, and Summerhill, the original one, is still there, and Charlie's Summerhill, Suvemäe. I don't know if somebody put in the chat that Suvemäe translates from Estonian to Summerhill in English, and I'm sure that's not a coincidence, is it, Charlie? I can see, I mentioned in the film, two ways of bringing the ideas of self-directed learning in a democratic human rights respecting context. It seems to me all schools should be like this, but it's so difficult to bring about change in state systems. I did it in one class. I thought I'd get fired, but I didn't. I got put in charge of all 7 classes of kids the same age, and we had a community of 200 12, 13-year-olds working in just this kind of way in a state school. That's what the book's about. But lately I've become very enthusiastic for the idea of really pushing the 20% of time in all schools. How could anybody reasonably object to that? 20% of time in all schools where the kids can take control of the curriculum to develop their own passions, interests, concerns, questions, whatever. I find the idea is readily acceptable, but getting anyone to actually do something about it is another matter. And I'd be interested to ask you, Charlie, what percentage of the day in Suvemäe, I know it will change from the younger kids to the older ones, but what percentage roughly are you able to allocate to self-directed opportunities?
So the kids who are graduated in the 9th class, after the 9th class, they continue to gymnasium, and they go to different, either to the main school or to other schools. They have around 25% of the time belonging to them. In that time, they can read, talk to friends, do sports, work on the projects, create clubs that we support. If we don't have the capability, then we try to look for it. And the younger the kids are, the longer they have for their own interest. Free play is super important, and this is something that we always talk about with parents. In the first, second class, let's say class, the kids who are around 7, 8, 9 years of age, they have around 60% of the time for their own initiated activities. So, well, when it's too cold, they don't go out. But now we have something like -10, -15 degrees, so it's really hard, and they don't really want much to do with that. One day a week, then maybe go and play snow war, but that's it. But otherwise, if the weather is good, they are outside, they are building stuff, they are playing, they are drawing, they are using the corners, the different corners that we have. So yeah, the older kids, 25% around, the younger kids around 65%.
Brilliant.
Lovely. Siobhan, would you like to say something before we get stuck into all of the questions in the chat?
Sure. I would just like to say something about why we are having this event today, because it's the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so on the video at some point, Charlie says, we are not saying that democratic education should be in every school, but it should be an alternative. And I think if Mia had interviewed me at the same time as this movie was being made, I think I would have also said something similar to that. And then the head teacher is also saying, you know, we can do democratic education for the children, but then the teachers have to do this and we have to do that. And something we've realized with the work we've been doing in the last few months with the IDEF resolution and things is that this is a bit of a strange approach, because so what you see on the screen is something from the first article of the Universal Declaration. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. So and these rights are the basis of a democratic society. So how can a democratic society say we are democratic everywhere except in schools? Because there's no footnote to this that says except for people in education. So how can we be denying human rights to a segment of the population for quite a significant portion of their lives? So I think when we can approach things from the angle of human rights, and specifically there's something in the Convention on the Rights of the Child that says children have a right to have an opinion and express it and have it heard for anything that concerns them, and education is obviously something that concerns them. So how can anything other than a democratic approach be consistent with fulfilling that right? So I think when we look at it from a rights perspective, a lot of things about democratic education just make a lot of sense.
Wonderful, thank you. So we've got a lot of amazing questions in the chat, and quite a few of them seem to be sort of clustering around certain themes that I think let me suggest that we start, Charlie. We've got quite a few questions that cluster around the idea of student empowerment, consent, and like details of your practical processes. So, for example, if you can say more about the concept of formative assessment, for example, consent, how the students opt in. I hope I'm not clustering too much here, but there was also the student who mentioned that the system had changed for conflict resolution during those last few years. How did that change come about? What was the student's involvement? If you can just sort of speak to that cluster of what does it really look like in terms of how empowered the students manage to be coming
Right.
in and being in the space and shaping it for their own needs.
Yeah, so it has changed throughout these 5 years already in multiple ways. It has gone from being totally voluntary school meeting to students deciding that there needs to be a degree of responsibility as being part of the community, to becoming the school meeting obligatory. So we meet twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays, for 1 hour each time, and everybody has access to the agenda of the day. They can suggest topics. They can raise questions. The idea is that only in terms of agreements, we only have 5 agreements, 5 rules which are non-negotiable, and these have to do with safety. So we have stop, the stop rule, when somebody is too intense or doing something that it's annoying to the other person, so they can shout stop. Then we have my body. Nobody can push me, touch me, hit me. My body. My name, nobody can call me names unless I want. In the case of Lucas, for instance, Lucas didn't want to be the official name, but Lucas wanted to be Lucas. So for us, that is simply clear. It's a matter of dignity. But if somebody starts calling others names, this is against this safety and let's say well-being agreements that we have. My things, nobody can touch my stuff. That is the 4th. And then our school and our environment, which has to do specifically with how we use resources, but also how we take care of the environment, of the community around the school as well. So in addition to that, everything is open to discussion. For instance, when I speak with youth workers or with teachers or so on, I have noticed that there is a very weak understanding of the history of schooling as such. There is some misunderstanding between what education and schooling, they seem to be the same thing, but they are not. But the schooling, and I'm speaking from an anthropological perspective, is a historical cultural construct. It was built in Prussia by a military priest, August Hermann Franke, by the orders of the Kaiser Frederick II. Very few people know about this. There's a really good book in Amazon called Instruction and Absolutism in Prussia by Edward von Melton. And this is a historian who wrote this book, and he traces the origins of the division by age of the kids as one of the characteristics of that system built by the military priest. The division of the days into disciplines, the authority of an adult who was allowed even to exercise violence. So there are 3, in our perspective, there are 3 components that regulate the lives within conventional schools: the curriculum, the timetable, and the authority of the adults. So our goal is to make the curriculum, the timetable, and the authority, the power within the school, a collective issue. So we are discussing with them also how do we organize the timetable. They bring to the school meeting questions like, look, we only have this lesson, and then there is a gap. We would like to move this lesson at this time, within the lessons, and this has to do with the formative assessment. We as adults required by the state system, we bring, let's say, a proposal of what the assessment looks like. Let's say, in my case, I work with projects on history, on human sciences, psychology, and so on. And then there is a discussion with them. How do you feel about this? We need to, in order for us to enjoy the free time, the free possibilities, the decision making that we have here, we also need to respect some requirements by the state. These have to do with what are the learning objectives. So the interesting approach is that kids who, throughout their schooling history, were not engaged in collaboratively in any kind of process, when they have the possibility, then they start participating actively. So if for instance, I have the idea or the plan, I say, guys, let's make some sort of research about history. You can choose the topic of history, or the specific moment, but how can we share whatever we learn about with the rest of the community? So maybe it's a presentation, maybe somebody would say, no, actually, I would like to do a video about it, and then it's integrating some other knowledge. Another person has done, for instance, a theater play. Another one who is really, really, Ella was there in the video, has staged an interview, and she behaves as the expert talking about the topic. So we really try to provide enough opportunities for them to engage into how the learning happens. We cannot say suddenly we will not learn any mathematics. At that moment, we are given the possibility to be just shut down because of negligence. What we try to actively focus on is how do we build the learning together with the kids, and how, which is the end goal for us, is how do kids become responsible for their own learning. Start taking responsibility, but also have the freedom to choose how they want to orientate their learning. So we meet twice a week with the kids from the 4th to the 9th class, roughly 10 to 16, 17 years of age. The 1st to 4th class, 7th to 10th class, they have their own circle. But then they also have the kids who are from 10 to 15. They also have their own smaller circles with kids more or less of their age. And in those circles, they also have the possibility to start planning things and talking about topics which regard them. In some cases, this happens once a week. They bring ideas to the school meeting, and because they have already coordinated in advance, these projects become a reality, well cemented within the practice, within their interests. Just some days ago, for instance, some kids proposed in the school meeting, let's go ice skating. We organized this thing. Some other kids from different age groups joined, and we were on Friday. Well, I wasn't ice skating. I don't like it very much, but they were ice skating, and it was a really interesting experience in how the older kids were taking care of the younger kids, how the younger kids were looking for possibilities to play with the older kids. So yeah, the idea is that these three areas, power, the authority, the making decisions, the timetable, how we use the time, and on what we organize the time. We use the time, are collaborative, collective, a collective effort. About the conflict resolution group, yes, there was a mediation group, but it happened that only a few people felt capable of helping others, but also at some moment we noticed that they were burning out. So at some moment the kids were saying, we cannot deal with this anymore. So we adopted, let's say, a different approach. This one I learned from the Flow ALC in Vicenza in Italy, friends Emanuela and Giulia. Basically, it's very individual. We use restorative circles. Kids participate in this process if they are interested in that. But whenever there are bigger conflicts that demand the whole participation of the school community, then we do it within the school meeting. And it's really interesting because that is exactly the scaffolding. The goal is not to punish, the goal is to get to agreements, to understand what are my rights, but also what are my responsibilities. So yeah, I hope I have answered most of the questions. If there is any clarification, I'm happy.
Wonderful. I think we could expand on that, and we've got a lot more concrete questions as well about Suvemäe specifically. But I'd like to first just open up a question that it would be lovely to hear from all three of you, which is there's also a cluster of questions and comments in the chat around the social emotional learning and the relationships. And Lucas's statement that, I can be friends with just about anyone here, whereas, in most schools, a neurodivergent transgender child is going to have a very hard time. So I was just wondering if all three of you could speak from your own experience in terms of what does it do to the peer interactions when children become more empowered and have a voice and have more autonomy? And how much do you think that actually makes a difference compared to the struggles that we have in mainstream school with problematic peer dynamics and bullying?
Go on,
I don't know
Derek.
who'd like to jump in first.
Okay, if that was for the panel. I think as you move towards a more participative approach, perhaps through ideas like student voice in state schools, that's more acceptable than talking about democratic education in most state schools. Student voice is okay. It's okay, of course, largely because it's tokenistic and doesn't mean much in most schools. But that doesn't have to be the case. I got enthusiastic about the 20. I find the idea of what happens if you introduce a democratic component into a fundamentally undemocratic and authoritarian institution. It's very, very interesting. And as I said, I think on the film, I expected to get fired for doing it with one class. I was their humanities teacher. I taught these 11, 12-year-olds English, history, geography, RE, and social studies about half the time. And it was possible to push the prescribed curriculum into about half the time, which left me roughly 25% to give to the kids, if you like, to say, you can spend this 25% of the time following questions and interests that are really of concern to you. And they did it. And I was one beginning teacher in a team of 7 classes in the first year of this big secondary school, 1,400 kids. I thought I'd get fired, but I didn't. Some of the other younger teachers heard about what was happening in my class, that we were having class meetings and class laws, and the kids were making decisions about what they'd study and what they'd do. And it caught on, and so we got 2 or 3 doing it. And then to my amazement, the next year, I was put in charge of the whole year group, and I had to get a team of 7. I was my second year of teaching. I was allowed to create a team. And we found people in the school began to be interested in what was going on. And we built the strength you get when you get 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 of you thinking in the same way, even with a staff of 70 or 80 teachers, this begins to have some impact. And we gradually, I would say, moved the ideas through the whole school. And after 2 years, I got headhunted and ended up as deputy head of another school. It can be done, but it's tricky. And you'll meet all sorts of problems on the way, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. I got into the 20% idea as an inspector when I found a number of schools in rural areas where it wasn't possible for the kids to stay behind and take part in extracurricular activities after school because they all went home in buses 20 or 30 miles. Several head teachers decided to move the extracurricular program into curriculum time. And in 1 or 2 schools that were quite close together, Wednesday afternoon became electives time. And the electives program was created in negotiation between the staff and the kids. But what we found in these schools that created these elective programs and took notice of the kids, first of all, the kids were learning very often in mixed age groups, which wasn't happening anywhere else in the school. They were discussing with teachers how the teachers could help them set up their program, whatever it was, which changed the relationships between the teachers and the kids. The teachers began to realize the potential of the young people, and the young people began to realize how useful it could be to have sympathetic adults supporting what you were doing. And it seems to me that would be 10%, wouldn't it, if it was Wednesday afternoon? Some parents said to me as the inspector, you know, my kid would get off their deathbed to get to school on a Wednesday afternoon. And this one of the schools involved the kids in staff appointments. And I asked the kids, what do you look for your new teachers coming to the school? What can they offer to the electives program, was what the kids said to me. And these schools began to change. It's very, very slow and really quite difficult and full of pitfalls and dangers, but it can be done. Thank you.
It can be done. And as you say in your book, another way is possible. Well worth a read. Stefan or Charlie, would you like to also speak to this question?
Go on, Malcolm.
Okay. Right. So I find the idea of some adults deciding that children need to learn socio-emotional learning as problematic as when some adults some years ago said they have to learn STEM, and then some decades ago said they had to learn literacy and numeracy, because it's all then being imposed on children. And if you don't have, and the sort of the worst part of that is, if you decide to teach literacy, you can teach it to some extent. If you decide to teach STEM, you can teach it to some extent. But then you decide to teach SCL, and I don't think it really works to try to teach it the way those other things are taught. But when you don't have those sort of questions coming in, which we are fortunate to have because we are able to be fully democratic because we are not in a larger system that restricts us, there is a lot of conflict that emerges. I mean, you put a bunch of, well, if you put a bunch of humans in a space and they spend a lot of time together, conflict will emerge. And it's quite natural then that if you have a bunch of children in a space, there will be conflict emerging as well. And I think in a lot of conventional settings, the so-called classroom management prevents that kind of conflict emerging. And whenever a conflict emerges, the adult steps in and solves the problem. So then children don't have an opportunity to develop the so-called socio-emotional learning skills because they have no say or no control over it. But in our case, conflict emerges, and then we make use of restorative practices. So there's quite a bit of time that we spend on that in terms of looking into what happened, how did that make you feel, what do you think should happen as a result, and they come up with their own practices about what we should do, what we shouldn't do, and how we help each other to not do those things, and guiding them, reminding them, things like that. And what we've seen actually is that sometimes the way they go about resolving these conflicts is an eye-opener for us, because they go about it with a lot more compassion and caring than we might naturally do. And I think like we had a role in terms of bringing in the restorative practices, but building on that, I think it's just very much part of human instinct that well, in most cases, at least, when you get along with people and you have a conflict, you want to try to sort this out in a way that everybody is happy. And by doing that is how they develop the SCL.
Rightly said, Stefan. I feel that, you know, it's like that joke. The teacher comes to the classroom and says, well, students, today we are going to learn about democracy. And one of them asks, but why? The reply is, because I say so, shut up. So we cannot really teach social emotional skills. We can model them. We can provide the possibilities. What I have noticed I don't have as much experience in education as many of you, definitely, but 22 years working in education, is that adults, we take responsibility for kids learning. And if it is not even learning, it's just for repetition of concepts, but it also applies to emotional social learning. Whenever there is a conflict, usually in conventional educational settings, the adult comes as King Solomon saying, okay, what did you do? Why did you do that? Okay, apologize now, give a hand, be friends, go back, you know, go back to play. But we are not really allowing them, providing the tools for them to find the possibilities, right? For us, with Lucas, with Lava, with many other kids, all the kids in the school, basically, but all the adults also, it's truly important that the learning environment is welcoming, but also provides the possibilities for everybody to feel dignified. Dignity is something that we are not talking about. We are laughing at other people falling. You know, this is part of our mass culture of entertainment. We had conversations about this, you know, and some young kids were a bit concerned, like, oh wait, Lucas is a male, but this Lucas is kind of female. What is this? And we're talking, look, it has to do with feelings, you know. If Lucas feels like Lucas, we need to respect that choice. You know, we cannot start laughing or judging that why do you wear this shirt, why do you like macaroni, or it's a personal feeling that is in no way affecting anybody. It's the person feeling whole, and we can provide this dignity. You know, it's about respect. When we speak about the topics, you know, that are complicated, and we have had some cases lately with a kid who comes from a very troubled family, and the kid is full of racist comments towards specifically one student from Brazil. And we are engaging in a process of trying to find the roots of this. You know, we speak with the kid, we speak with the community. We understand that the precedence is not in no way a marker of anything. You know, that we cannot just start pointing out this kind of exclusion approaches. But there are some things that go beyond also our reach, and in this specific case, the parents, the mother is not very supportive, rather excuses the child. In those situations, it's super difficult when we are not able to collaborate with families. I feel that it's truly important that we share the perspectives with families. So if we speak about social emotional learnings, we cannot be exercising democracy in schools, in this school specifically, and having a dictatorship or an undignified treatment at home. So this is something that we have also worked with some families and has worked really nicely, specifically facilitating active listening and nonviolent communication with the families. When this happens, we see that the kids go to another level, a level in which, you know, I feel respected. I feel that my dignity is in order, and then is able to give it also. So it is a process of modeling, but also lots of reflections with families, especially adults, not really solving or taking responsibility for this, but rather helping the kids develop those tools through modeling, basically.
Great. We are nearing the end of our official time. I just want to check before we go into our next questions. I think that there's an agreement among the panel that, you know, we'll officially end, but that there could be time for further discussion, more questions that we could also record for those who do need to leave at the end time. Is that fine with all three of you?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Then I'd like to suggest we just go to two fairly quick specific questions for Charlie, and then we'll go back into a nice big juicy cluster that you can all comment on. So Charlie, the first part of that is, what is the age range of the kids at Suvemäe?
So they come, we have had 1 or 2 kids come age 6, but usually children in Estonia start school at age 7 until age 16, but we also have a student who is 17, 18. So around 7 to 16, 17.
Great.
From
So
the
you've got that
first class to the 9th class would be equivalent.
Right, so it really is thoroughly age mixed. And then there was a specific question as well about collaboration between Suvemäe and local organizations or businesses, where students could maybe get access to external resources for more ambitious projects. And also, I mean, you mentioned also needing specialists. To what extent can you source those specialists from your community?
Well, we managed this year to get a social pedagogue who is great, because I'm not fully, I don't fully agree with the perspective that what we are doing costs more. Actually, we are reusing materials. We are multiplying ourselves to cover different angles, but we definitely needed somebody to be able to, either a psychologist, a social pedagogue. So we got this person, which is great. We continue collaboration with other local institutions, specifically child defense or psychology. What is the name, like providers of psychological support. And yes, definitely we collaborate. In fact, one of our goals is to bring the school outside of the schoolhouse and to bring society into the school. So we have different possibilities. Every Friday we get guests who come to speak about different topics to build stuff with the kids. We have collaborated with a local university in a project building a Zen garden. The kids were planning the whole process. We got funding and they were in charge of that. We have also, within the neighborhood, collaborated with some people who have a makerspace. The kids, for instance, had a series of workshops on how to fix their bikes. And last week I met with one of the mothers of these kids who attended, and I said, but this is fantastic. I had my bike there for 2 years broken. She went to 2 workshops, came back home and fixed my bike. You should do that more often. So yes, we try to do it. We also have some collaboration with educational NGOs. And also we have an NGO, and we try to also support youth workers on how to bring a more democratic approach to their workplaces. I am also this year, because I decided to not to continue with the position of coordinator, head of studies. I am more engaged in the main house. And the idea is to, within this massive construction of 900 students, to start finding more time. The 20% idea is something that I'm trying to push, but still adults are super worried about wasted time. I'm trying to push the perspective that young people need to participate more, not only saying what they feel could be, not only consultation, but also to engage in more interest-based learning possibilities. And we had this year, for the first time, 8 interest-based workshops facilitated by young people in the main house, which was super powerful. So now we are trying to work on how to make it so that there are more alternatives, and even if there is not the whole workshop, at least there are some possibilities in which they can decide, okay, I'm gonna work on this, I'm gonna work on this, I'm gonna do this or learn that, whatever it is. So play more. They were asking for more sports. So yeah, there is collaboration. We are looking forward to more, definitely.
So
there was another question, right?
yeah, no, that was great. And that also kind of leads us into the next question cluster very nicely, that what you were saying about the work in the main house to actually now start extending some of these concepts beyond the little Suvemäe cocoon, and see what you can actually extend there. Because the next question cluster sorry to put so many together, but they really are sort of one theme. So the question, if you paste it all together, is sort of, how do you deal with the contradictions of a school practicing democracy in an undemocratic institution, with, you know, reflections on the power structures, for example, the comment in the film, overusing freedom, questions about, does it create confusion to have a 20% program in a school that is otherwise very prescriptive? Is there any concern that these types of programs, on the one hand, might create confusion about self-directed education and centers that are completely democratic? And then on the other hand, does it confuse to have the democratic school in a regular school? Do you really have the freedom to be democratic with just 20% of the time allocated? And then, you know, what you were saying there in terms of, does something like a Pandora's box effect take place? Once you create space for authentic student voice, how does that actually start changing teachers' beliefs, student positionality? So that's a whole cluster again that I think it would be lovely to have comments from all three of you. And I see Derry's raring to go.
Well, I'll just tell a quick story, if I may. With my first democratic class in a secondary school of 11, 12-year-olds, they created their own laws. And as somebody said, I think Sifan said, the kids come up with ideas that you'd never dream of in a million years as an adult. And one of the things in my class was that if it got a bit too noisy, I said it, I'm not the class policeman, it's not my job to tell you to shut up. If you can't work because the environment's too noisy, do something about it. And so they passed a class law that if 5 people put their hands up, the class would have 5 minutes quiet. And one of the kids had a watch and it would be timed. And at the end of the 5 minutes, they'd say, 5 minutes up, and everyone would start talking again. They had a maths teacher who tried to control them. I didn't teach them for maths, one of the subjects I didn't teach them. And they went to the maths teacher, who shouted at them, be quiet, be quiet. And everyone knows who's been anywhere near working with classes in schools, the more you shout, the noisier the class gets. So in the end, they got so fed up with this teacher shouting at them, some of them actually wanted to learn some maths. They put the 5 hands went up, and the class timekeeper said, 5 minutes quiet. And then the teacher, the class went completely silent, because if you talked in a quiet time, you'd come up in the class court on a Friday afternoon. And I told these kids, this is just for my lessons, folks. We play these games of democracy. You mustn't do it in other teachers' classes. And this teacher then shouted at them, why have you gone quiet? Which was quite funny. I heard about this from kids in the class who told me. She then complained to the teachers' union representative that I was interfering with the discipline of her class. And it led to some very interesting discussions and some understanding of the kids. Of course, they knew damn well they shouldn't have done this in another teacher's class. And things like this went on happening, but eventually that teacher started to work in a much more participative way herself. Sorry, that was a long-winded story, wasn't it?
No, that was lovely. Just a quick goodbye to people, just a very quick goodbye to people who have to leave. Please just do stay in touch. You know where to find some of us, and there are even more of us. This is a tiny little slice of this amazing world that you can be joining. And yeah, go well. And now, yes, on to more responses to this lovely cluster of questions.
Well, yes, I mean, I feel, you know, when I came back from Spain after after completing a PhD studies, and I started meeting with people to just, you know, share some ideas and to start thinking together what could happen. It was super interesting that many people would hear democratic education and they would say, so children can do whatever they want all the time. And it seemed to me that we really don't have a clear understanding of what democracy is. It's not only about freedom, it's about the responsibilities. It's also about a sense of community building. It's not about individualism. It's about us together for the greater good, let's say. If it was only about freedom, I decide that I use my freedom and I drive 100 kilometers per hour on the center of the city. But there are boundaries, and there need to be boundaries. Functional boundaries, I believe, make part of a democracy. Now, how we decide on those boundaries, that is the tricky part, right? The US is showing now that they demand a strong person who says this is what happens, and end of the story. No discussion. Discussion is seen as something as a waste of time, and it's exactly because we have been raising kids in that way. Discussion, listening to others is a waste of time. You need to be the louder, right? The louder one who is able to impose your point, maybe because people are afraid they will not contest it. So for me, yes, I have thought a lot about this. Is it ironic? Is it dysfunctional that they come and they live within a context in which they have a voice, they have the possibility to participate, to own the learning experience? I don't think so. And what I have gathered from kids who have finished the 9th grade and have gone to other schools, but also from kids who perhaps didn't come to terms with some aspects of the school and left, and later on I meet them or I meet their parents and they tell me the experience was so powerful that they now they have become empowered. They want to make their voices be listened. They have arguments. They learn how to argument. They are not swallowing, because authority says so. Lucas, the person who was, and I shared this with Mia, Lucas, and I would like to parenthesis Mia, and the Quest team is just amazing. The support that you are providing not only to us but also to so many schools, and I feel very, very happy that we have come to meet you guys. Lucas, for instance, in the movie, came with deep depression, suicidal attitudes, very, very depressed. After 2 years, Lucas graduated. Now Lucas is in the 10th class in another school. And I got super surprised to see videos made by Lucas, by him and by his friend. Lucas is now the spokesperson for his classroom to the school direction. So this is a person who was totally powerless, and thanks to the fact that was courageous to engage in this process, now it's a leader in his own school. So I do believe that even if they have to engage in state regulated activities of some sort, the most important thing, self-determination theory, the relationship, the relatedness, they felt it. They had the possibility to gain autonomy, to make some decisions. They built on those competences. I feel that is the most important thing. They will take it with them for as long as they can.
Thank you.
Can I ask Charlie a question? I wonder how important it is that you have a separate building for Suvemäe.
Oh, totally, yeah. The autonomy
when I tried to introduce my project, I had to work within classrooms in the main school building, which did create a lot of complexities.
No, totally. I mean, and it's because we have a microculture there, right? I mean, we are not, we call each other by first name. We play with them on the corridors. I grab smaller kids and just turn them around, put them back, and continue walking as if nothing. And they just feel like, okay, this guy is just playing with me. Let's play more. Come here. We decorate the place as we feel. Yeah, it's super important to have that degree of autonomy, how to organize the space. And we are lacking space. We have 76 kids at the moment. And we feel that we need one bigger space. We are always missing it for quiet activities but yeah, so far it has been good enough. So yeah, really important to have that space. Sipan.
Yeah. Just to add a small perspective that might help to sort of frame this question. So when it comes to democratic education, just like democracy, it's not something that's fixed in stone. It's evolving, and it evolves in different ways in different places. Not always in a progressive way. Sometimes it regresses as well. And so I would say that democratic education, just like democracy itself, is always a work in progress. And I find it quite ironic that the former East Germany called itself the German Democratic Republic. North Korea calls itself the People's Democratic Republic, or some term like that. And I don't think you would expect that democracy in those countries would be as democratic as Sri Lanka, or that Sri Lanka is as democratic as Estonia. So of course there are variations. The fact that these variations exist and they change are a part of our life. So I think it may be simpler for everybody if there was one same thing everywhere, but the nature of life is that it is not. So I think it's okay that we are able to have a fully democratic school, Charlie's situation, that is the school within a school, and some other centers will be in some other way, and we are all progressing as best as we can in the environment that we are in.
So thank you. Given that we are in extra time, there's also a question that takes us slightly sideways, which is how does this event today, looking at Suvemäe, relate to the IDEC resolution and the Clarify Compulsory Education campaign? I don't know if somebody would like to jump in and tackle that one in a succinct way, because I don't think we can explain the entirety of that campaign. But as I say, we are technically in extra time on this event, so I think we can go there.
Totally, yeah, but Sifan, yes.
All right. Okay. So I think this campaign is also very much evolving and a work in progress. So when we started on this maybe 6 months ago, we had the idea that international human rights were against democratic education because it had this thing called compulsory education. And I think it was Henning who made that statement, because the way it's translated in German, it is that schooling is compulsory. But then we found different bits of various covenants. Then we started looking at eventually the minutes of the UDHR drafting, and we realized that what they meant from compulsory education was a very different meaning to how many countries are understanding it. Although some countries do understand it in the sense of education must be provided, but there is no compulsion that a child must attend that. So the IDEC resolution and writing to the UN was about how to get that conversation out there. Hopefully we will eventually get a reply from the committee on that in some form, but regardless of that, we want to keep the conversation going. These events are part of keeping that conversation going, and the more we dive into human rights, the more we see that democratic education is the most right-respecting form of education on the planet. So on 23rd, there's an event that the IDEC Taiwan people are hosting. We want to do something in January. So it's all different ways of keeping this conversation going to create more acceptance of democratic education in the mainstream. So not just that, the people doing democratic education are hiding away under the radar and doing their thing quietly, but we want to take it out there for it not just to be another alternative, but to be seen as a rights affirming thing. So we are figuring things out as we go. So I think that will be how this event fits in with the resolution.
Thank you. And Charlie, you also had something to say on this, I think.
Sorry, I participated not very actively, but I was there in Nepal during the discussion, and also before. I feel that it's truly important to bring this question of whether the fact that we have children's rights and they are not the same as human rights just kind of, they are different, but they are at the same time humans. I believe that if we start bringing human rights as a concept, not only related as compulsory education, but as a concept to schools, well, it would make it much more sensitive to start speaking about the kids as agents of learning, as subjects of learning, as citizens, as commoneers from the perspective of educational commons. So I don't think that we have this in our minds on a daily basis when we are dealing with conventional schools and what happens in conventional schools. I don't think that many parents actually realize what is happening in conventional schools. And we need to highlight the need for effective practice that enables people, young people, to participate in those decisions instead of just following authoritarian structures born from Prussia. Again.
Yeah. So I think we're probably going to have time for one last to two last questions. I'm going to suggest that we take this question that I'm going to read. Well, it's two questions to collapse together from the chat. And then for our very last question, if we have time, I think we're just going to do the other thing and have somebody raise a hand, because there's quite a lot in the chat that hasn't been addressed. And whoever's still here and wants to throw their hand up first, I think can have the chance for the very last one. So the second last one is, I'm a university student completing my Masters of Teaching in Early Childhood. We've got quite a few comments in the chat also about early childhood and whether this applies. My university doesn't support alternate education models in its units. How can I make an impression on them to open a conversation about adapting the university teacher training models to include these models? And another question that goes together with that is, how do we inform and transform the public perception of democratic schools? But with that particular slant, how do we actually get the teacher training facilities to start taking this seriously so that yeah, we can support the next generation of teachers?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a question. I feel that the basis needs to be research. There is no scientific background for the schooling, conventional schooling system that we have to be scientifically the best method for people to develop. So I believe that we need to do more research, what the effects are, especially mental health. I am of the opinion that the next pandemics, and we see it already, has to do with young people's mental health. So still it's very much influenced by economy, right? In the sense that early childhood is seen as the period for kids to be able to be stuffed with knowledge so that they would catch up in school better and get a better academic performance, better life. And so there is just a chain of fallacies going on there. I feel that we need to bring more research on the brain, on learning, on why when people feel appreciated, positive about themselves, they actually can start learning. That this linear idea of at 7 you learn this, at 8 you learn this, it's actually a fallacy. So I would just suggest to bring more or to highlight more research on the development of social emotional skills in young people, rather than just focusing on the development of skills which are seen perhaps as rational, abstract thinking, and so on. And what was the other question, Jana?
So specifically, how do we, let's look concretely, how do we support this teaching student right now to get her faculty to start looking into this? Can we give her any suggestions that she could use to approach the faculty in a concrete way?
Gabriel was asking about something similar. We're speaking about democratic education from age 6, more or less, but what happens with early childhood? I do believe that there are spaces, and perhaps this is the point. There are spaces where the kids are being involved in decision making. You have a clear view of the child as somebody who demands, deserves dignity and being treated as an equal member of society. So perhaps that is the point, right? To get to research these kind of spaces for this person who wrote the message. I feel it's so stagnated. I have felt also the same when I was meeting with some professors in local universities. I felt that it was very stagnated, and also it has to do with the fears that parents have. Fear is a value that is all around in our societies. People are victims of fear of getting lost, of losing your phone, so you need to get an extra warranty, of fear of other people speaking to them on the street. So when parents are afraid of the future, perhaps we need to also provide with the possibilities to learn better about what are the skills which make a difference. In the specific case of that university, perhaps some Erasmus Plus project in which the student can go to another university and get a supervisor who is more sensitive. It's a complicated topic situation.
Thank you. I just want to mention very briefly, because in terms of the sort of the under sixes, I've been looking into this a little bit because of engaging with the legislation in South Africa. And I've found that there's actually a chain of people quoting people, quoting people, quoting people around the academic early learning in sort of kindergarten and pre-kindergarten that goes back to a source that doesn't work. So the dominant narrative around the sort of early literacy training for young people, if you actually just dig a little bit, I only found one sort of kindergarten level project that actually shows really, really great results for later on academic achievement and socio emotional self-management, everything. And it's actually based on Reggio Emilia. It's not at all based on giving early ABCs. So just if you want to go researching in that direction, maybe, and create a bit of a paper for your professors to have a look at it, it might be quite interesting if you do a bit of self-directed education yourself. Anybody else like to take on this question?
Yeah. Little thing I would like to add. So although most of our discourse is on how school education, primary, secondary school education is coercive, it tends to be that much of education, even beyond those ages, is still very much adult-directed and coercive in some ways, although adults have a bit more freedom, at least, to choose not to go into certain programs if they wish to. But education is not only a child's right, it's a right for anybody of any age. So somebody doing a bachelor's or a master's should also really have the right to say that this is what I want in my education and you need to support me to have this. So if I want to look at or study about how this would work in an early childhood setting, then I have that right. I should be supported to fulfill that right. And if the people who are learning to be teachers are not respected as full human beings who have full rights, it's then awkward for them to then go into classrooms and treat children as full human beings. So really this change has to extend all the way, not just in childhood.
Yeah. Right. We are in our last couple of minutes. Who would like to stick up their hand?
There were some comments about screens.
Yeah, that's a big one. Do we really want to go there? If you would like to, Charlie, you can go for it. I think it's
I will just share.
topic.
I will just share what my personal process has been with it. I didn't believe there was. I was of the idea of the opinion that there is no, and maybe some people would disagree with. There is no such a thing as screen addiction. And then we started with the school, providing more opportunities for kids to engage in multiple possibilities. And At this moment, I do believe that whenever there is a shortage in functional boundaries, specifically parents not sharing with kids the possibility for the kids to get bored and start exploring different things, we are giving our kids an open gate to massive entertainment and releases of dopamine that never finish. They are never ending. I do believe that we need some spaces in which the kids, don't have this thing at hand to entertain them, because they're renewing, there are different possibilities, but that they can at some point just feel like, okay, I'm going to check around what I do. Okay, I will engage on this, I will engage on that, instead of being individually isolated from the rest of the world involved in this. Yes, I play video games, so it is not me being born in 77, if that is the argument. So I do like video games, and I play chess on my phone, for instance. But I again feel that we, as adults, as parents, oftentimes we just give kids, conventional parents, give kids a screen and forget about what would happen. At Suvemäe, we started with a lot of free time, and we started building the school agreements with the kids. So in the beginning, the question was, okay, guys, we understand that there are lots of interesting things going on phones. There are videos, there are games, there are chats with friends, and that is part of our lives, right? But at the same time, being a public school means that we have several eyes on us. And we also need to deal with the state requirements in some sort. Otherwise, we cannot really argue that it's a possibility to give enough time for young people to engage in their own interests, because the only interest is the phone. So we need to develop a system in which we have also time for all the other things that go on around the school, and also that you can think about all things that could happen in the school. So in the beginning, they said self-regulation. We asked, what does it mean? They said, well, we just take into account the time and that's it. Okay, let's try it. We tried for a couple of weeks. We were recording, like kind of documenting what was happening. Many kids were stuck in the phones. They would not really stop. They wouldn't go to any lesson. I have read a lot about the idea of escapism and the sense of locus of control and how it is raised through video gaming or through engaging communication, which is very normal. But we say, guys, there is no self-regulation when actually we are all the time in front of the screens. What shall we do? It should be 1 hour a day, somebody said, and all the other kids agreed. Okay, let's try, but when? Oh, no, it's open. So we decide when the hour happens. Okay, so we started with that. We continue documenting, and then the kids were like, oh, wait, it's 1 hour already. So, and then they were jumping to the next screen next to them, and staying there next to somebody's screen. And we documented, we showed the kids, guys, this is not working. We really need to put some boundaries. For us, this is also a tool, right? What Derry was saying in the video about machines, having the information and what we can do differently is true, and this can be a tool, right? To start getting information, to contrast information, to think about different topics, to get to learn about some other stuff. But there should be also some moments in which we are not totally distracted by games and so on. So again, when we brought the topic, the kids decided that there should be a fixed time. And they suggested from 12 in the day until 1. It is the time when, if somebody wants, they can be on their phones, they can write to their friends, they can play games, they can watch videos. We consider this their right. It's part of their life experience. But we, again, believe that there is a need for some functional boundaries that allow them to get into positive boredom. That one which is not imposed as sit there, shut up, do as I tell, but rather is you own your own time, figure it out. We can help you build this or do that. Some kids actually came up with the idea of organizing a DJ club. I do DJ, so we organized the DJ club because they had that possibility there. So yeah, I do feel that we need some boundaries. It's not everything about freedom. I think that there are also the balance in between freedom and responsibility is important. Sorry for
Great.
the
We are right at the very, very end.
Terry wants to add something.
Yeah, I think, Derry, if you want to sort of say an extended goodbye, and then Stefan and Charlie, if you each want to say a brief goodbye, and then we will wrap up. And then, yeah, we will make sure that we download the chat and send it to everyone who hasn't managed to save it.
I feel that, Charlie ought to have the last word. I couldn't resist mentioning this book. We're trying to do things differently. It's edited by Freya Aquaroni, and it's students and staff on the BA Social Studies programme at King's College, London, who've produced this book collaboratively. And it's about their attempt to create a collaborative, democratic BA programme in quite a respected university. And the interesting thing about it is that Freya herself went to the English Summerhill, and she's taking her philosophy from Summerhill School into London University. We're trying to do things differently. I put it in the chat. One of the most attractive things about the book is that it's completely free. I don't know where she got the funding, but she's got it. And if you just send her an email, she'll send you a copy.
Great. Thank you. So yeah, let's give Charlie the last word. So Stefan, if you want to check out next.
Yes. So I'm going to share this again because just relating to this screen thing, an example that really came to mind was also about personal hygiene, like brushing teeth. And in a way, like the phone, if you don't use it properly, you don't have very immediate consequences. I mean, you could just not brush your teeth for a long time, and then by the time you start getting cavities, it's really too late. And in a way, a phone could also be like that. So I think it's quite reasonable when we are concerned about people. So not just about children, but concerned about people in general, that we are concerned about things that might harm them and how do we communicate it. And so boundaries could come just like we have sort of a practice about brushing teeth at certain times. So that's also sort of a boundary. But how we go about setting that boundary, because this statement also talks about dignity. So we can have a conversation with another human being, an adult or a child, in a way that is respectful and honors that person's dignity. And okay, this is why I'm worried if you don't brush your teeth. This is why I'm worried if you use the phone in this way. And then approach it with the sort of open mind that we may not actually know the answers. I mean, screen time is so complicated. There are so many benefits, there are so many dangers, there are so many risks. We can't really just say that 1 hour a day is the way to go about it. But if we are approaching it with that concept of dignity and respect, then we will keep amending that agreement in that spirit and to keep trying to find something that works. And I think that's really at the heart of a respectful relationship, regardless of what it is about. So whether it's about screen time, whether it's about having to do some sort of assessment because the government is requiring that we do that, we can approach it in a way that respects the dignity of the other person. So that would be my parting message.
Thank you. And a absolute final word from Charlie.
Thank you, Jana. I would like to thank, wait, I will change the view so I can see everybody. I would like to thank Richard for the idea of organizing this. Unfortunately, I missed the event in the morning, but we are together in this, promoting more sensitive approaches to learning. Thank you for organizing this, Richard. Also, Derry, for the support that has been for a long time. And also, Sifan, Jenna, Gabriel, Henning, all the people here who it's interesting that how we get to know each other. And I feel that every time that I was in IDEC or UDEC, it was just massive learning, massive ideas. So what we have managed to do in Suvemäe I hope there is something also that helps other people who are getting into this process. We believe that, and this is something that hopefully we will be able to develop with the Quest team, that more research is needed. So the next step, I'm not so sure how long I will be in Suvemäe. I am convinced that Suvemäe will continue when the people inside of Suvemäe, the kids, the families, the teachers, the adults, they push it forward. It doesn't depend on me being there. So I'm very glad that this is happening. I would like it to continue, and I would like it to be, as there is said, a pioneer of possibility for other experiences for other people. An example of something that could happen, and if there is the need, interest in support, with all the pleasure, I can collaborate. The next step is what we are dealing with Jana as well, and with Mia, the process of researching the graduates of self-directed education, democratic schools, and their narratives and experiences. And from a scientific perspective, we don't have this piece of evidence, which is super important. What happens after people go through that process of participating in community, making decisions together, feeling that they are cared for, that they are welcome, that they have dignity in the place. And we need to bring this more into conventional schools, be them private or public. I feel that many more kids need, they demand our commitment to that happening. So I thank you very much for all your support. If you want to write or get in touch, please, by all means, would be my pleasure. And I feel honored to be here to have share with you this piece of experience in our small school in Tallinn. Thank you.
Beautiful. So yes, let's just notice how much there is here about connecting, being part of a community, co-inspiring, co-supporting. We really are all part of an ecosystem. If you're watching this video, if you've been here today, if you've received this link from somebody later on, please know that you are part of this. And yeah, we can do this together, because another way is possible. Thank you, everybody. And good afternoon, good evening, good morning, and good night.